In this video, we're going to discuss in my opinion, one of the most difficult things to learn starting out in computer science. So with that, don't be frightened. We're here for you. It's going to be okay. But just be aware that this is a pretty difficult concept, and it's okay if you don't fully understand it right off the bat. We're going to be talking about, it's called passing by reference, and it has to do with functions. We've talked in the past about passing by value, and passing by value, just a quick reminder, is when we have something like void read number int a cout a, and then we pass, read number 7 or whatever. We'll put read number up here just for good measure. And so this is an example of passing by value, just a very, very simple example. Now, passing by reference is similar to passing by value in that it involves passing something into a function, but we are, as the name suggests, passing by reference rather than simply passing by value. So what actually happens in this case when we're passing by value, kind of behind the scenes, is that a copy of whatever value is passed into this function, so a copy is made of that value, and then that copy is sent to read number, and then at the end of this function, that copy gets destroyed. And so we can think of this kind of like if we have a teacher handing out syllabi at the beginning of a semester, they hand every person a copy of their, they each get their own syllabus. And you can highlight that, you can write things all over it, you can draw pictures on it, you can write mean things about the teacher on it, things like that happen. And the teacher doesn't really care because you all have your own copy. She wrote everything down on her master copy and then gave all of you as students copies. So that's kind of like passing by value. Passing by reference, any changes that you make to a variable inside of a function affect it outside of that function. And so what that means is if we were to, let's go ahead and we'll create int number equals 7. We'll pass in number. So just quick review. Anything that happens inside read number to this value that got passed in will not affect number here in main. But when we pass by reference, it will affect the original variable in main. That is because in pass by value, we make a copy, and that's very, very important. That copy is made. Sorry for my terrible handwriting. This is why I kind of stick to coding more often than writing. A copy is made because what we pass is actually the value. So value is passed. Now in pass by reference, we are actually passing, it's called a memory, a memory, oh my goodness. Memory, we'll just write it down here, memory address. That's an M. We're passing a memory address. And so we've talked about this kind of before, that whenever we create a variable, so let's just take a look at that real quick. We'll erase this off. When we create a variable, so we do int a equals 7, what this looks like in memory is we have a, and it's kind of sitting by this little box here, and this is a location in memory, and it holds a value 7. And then when we do a equals 12, okay, well, that was interesting. When we do a equals 12, change this back. When we put a equals 12, what ends up happening is inside this box that got partially erased, the 7 gets erased, and 12 gets put in. And so when we pass by value, all that happens is whatever's inside the box gets passed into our function. Now, that is not the case when we pass by reference. So let me go ahead and get rid of this just for clarity. In pass by reference, we still have, int a equals, man, this thing is killing me today. Int a equals 7, and we have a, and it has 7. But instead of 7 being passed in, the entire memory address gets passed in. And then any changes that we make inside this here function are going to actually affect the value inside so that it gets updated with 7. And so let's take a look at what this actually looks like in code. Because right now what you see on your screen in terms of code is all passed by value. And the difference between, changing something from pass by value to pass by reference is actually very simple. All you do is add an ampersand right here and up here. And now we have a passing by reference, or a referential function. And so what this means is if I change a equals 12, and we're going to not call this read number anymore, we're going to say change to 12, because why not? And now, when we output number, go ahead and get an end line there. So we'll say before change to 12, number equals number, and then cout after change to 12, number equals number. I'm going to get rid of that line. So let's go ahead and run it. See what happens. So we see before change to 12, number equals 7. After change to 12, though, number equals 12. And so even though we made the change down here, and even though these are different names, you can see I called this number, and down here I'm calling this A. So even though they're different names, different functions, everything, because we passed by reference with this little ampersand, it makes it so that any changes down here will persist back into main, or back into the calling function more appropriately. And so this is actually super useful if we think of things like, and whenever we return a value from a function, we can only return one value, because you can only have one return statement. So if we have int change to numbers, or I don't know, int answers or something, and it takes two integers, one of them, no, we'll just say one of them by reference. We're actually not going to go down that. We're not going to go down that road, but it is very useful. It's just too much all at once, so we're not going to worry about that. But it is very useful for changing multiple values, all basically at the same time within a function. What I mean by that is, once again, just to reiterate, we can only return one value from a function. So if we want a function to alter multiple values for our program, then we can just pass in multiple values by reference and then change them inside that function, and those changes will persist. Once again, this is one of the hardest concepts to understand, especially as a CS1 student with limited exposure to programming, or even lots of exposure to programming. It does get a little bit easier with time, so just know that if you don't fully understand it, that's 100% understandable and okay. Don't stress. If you do understand it, good on you. I would still highly recommend experimenting around with this a lot more, because it is very difficult to understand.